Hello friend, how is it going? Welcome back to Toyota Maintenance YouTube channel. Today in shop I have this gorgeous 2009 Toyota Sienna. She has approximately 160,000 miles. Gorgeous paint, Toyota Sienna XLE. She has that beautiful leather trim and wood. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. It's a new owner, they just purchased her, and she has only one problem so far. And it's an interesting one, and it's definitely worth filming. And this is what's happening with it. If you start driving everything, it's fine. But when the vehicle will warm up, there is some shudder or shaking from the back. Immediately after he came, we went on the test drive, and there was nothing happening in the beginning. But after a couple minutes, let's say 5-10 minutes, we are driving back on the straight road, 55 miles per hour, and absolutely, suddenly, the whole back of the car started shaking. You can first feel it in the seats in the back, then it's coming to the front even, and the whole back is clearly shaking. So we arrived to the shop, hopped out, and this is what we found. We focus on the rear wheels, so we immediately came and we put the hands here towards to the wheel, and this is completely cold. There's nothing happening, but on this side, right here, this is already 10-15 minutes, because he was waiting for somebody to pick him up, his wife. It's still radiating heat right here, so we have definitely problem right here. So let's start with this wheel. We can hear the brake pads slightly touching the rotor, but the wheel is perfectly spinning around. It's even hard to spin it. Wow. I was also questioning what could cause the heat. It will be the wheel bearing. If the bearing was going bad, that will absolutely overheat the rim, could cause shaking of the whole vehicle. But considering every single detail which we discussed, I believed we have a seized brake caliper, 21mm socket for Toyota lug nuts on Sienna. Here we go. Here is first closer look on this whole assembly, and there is a spot right now where it's very hard to turn it. There is a one which is easier, and then it again goes harder. In the best scenario financially, it could be seized the sliding pins. The lack of lubrication, the dust boots are not ripped. So far I don't see any of that. So I was able easily wiggle the caliper off. So let's continue with removing this adapter or torque plate. I think Toyota calls it in some manuals torque plate, which holds the brake pads. It's a 17mm on the back. It's two of those. Let's see, let's put it on the bench. So hopefully you can see perfectly the detail of the whole part. The pads seems to be freely moving in its channels. But this one, there's definitely a problem. This one is way thinner here than on the back, so it was not freely moving, and everything has to be inspected very carefully. This is rusted in. This hardware doesn't want to fall off like this one, so that's another problem. But I was talking about the pins. Look at it. That pin for the floating function, so this part floats freely around that rotor, should be moving in and out. Here are the dust boots, they seem to be okay, but the pin doesn't want to move. Neither this one. Finally, there is absolute lack of lubrication, the grease, it's gone. So this one pulled out, I will just set it there, and this one barely moves. Again, that should be perfectly looped, and it's completely dried. So we are basically considering this as rusted in. It really doesn't want to come off. I will have to pry on it a lot to take it off. So that's another item. These channels, all that rust, it's really important when you're putting it together. The rust buildup has to be removed completely. So we are looking basically right now for the complete brake job, and we didn't even test everything yet. The way I was turning the rotor, it was area when it was easy, and then it was way more difficult. So most likely this rotor is warped. I will check for the minimal thickness, but looking at it, this rotor should be replaced. But we need to remove it and look inside. There still could be purely theoretically broken the part of parking brake assembly inside. And the rotor could be stuck on that. So we will have to look at it in the light. So I'm not sure how they were using the parking brake, if ever, because if we look inside of that rotor, it's basically a rusted surface. But there's no signs of overheating or anything like that. Let's say the parking brake was stuck and dragging right here, therefore overheating the rotor. I didn't grab a brake clean and didn't spray the dust off yet on purpose, just to show you what you can discover here. So that parking brake shoes, this is the rear and this is the front. The rear one, the thickness right here, if you look at it, it's maybe 1 millimeter, but the front, it's 1 millimeter or less. So obviously this should be offered or considered for replacement too, this entire parking brake mechanism. So we already discovered that these sliding pins were partially seized. How is that brake caliper working? Is the piston completely seized? There are different tools we use for pushing the pistons back in the calipers. This I love, it's a Blue Point ratcheting system, but I will use the basic one because this will give me the best feel of the resistance of that piston being pushed back. And I want to evaluate how much pressure it takes to push to move the piston back in the caliper. we are assuming that it's bad and it's seized, and that's why it was overheating. And it's hard. This piston so far is creating huge amount of resistance. I'm still able to turn it, but with a huge difficulty. So we have a case here that all of this is happening due to multiple factors. It's not just one. If this was completely seized, that piston, I will be not able to move it using this tool. It will not happen. It's coming, but with a lot of resistance. And no matter what you find on the brakes, always check the bearing. So you can give a listen to it, despite the heavy rain. But this bearing is perfect. It's absolutely quiet. There was never any play even with the tire. So this is not the reason of that extreme heat being generated on this wheel. Now you saw it step by step with me as it was open. So what is my conclusion? Finding this paper thin parking brake shoe, we have a first recommendation. These parking brake shoes on both sides need to be replaced. Whatever I will discuss right now, it's always for both rear wheels. You will never do just one here because it was creating heat and left the other one. These parts are also sold always in pairs, so please don't ever try DIY to replace just one brake system at the one wheel. It's always on the same axle across the vehicle. So all of it will be done on the other side too. The sliding pins barely moved, but they are not rusted. There are remainings of the lubricant, the grease, high temperature grease. The boots are not shot, so there's no reason to replace this strap, adapter, or torque plate, whatever Toyota calls it. I will use the file. This will be perfectly, the channels will be cleaned. To receive new hardware, this one is rusted, old, so you need to replace the brake pads. They are down, one of them. It's completely uneven also. The one side is way thinner than the other one. So it was many reasons why this was happening. There is many different malfunctions on it. The rotor, there is a lip on both sides and it's pretty thin, and most likely it's warped because when I try to turn the wheel in one space, despite the fact nobody was touching the brakes, the one area it moved easily and then it was dragging. So that could be resurfaced. Looking at the thickness, it's pretty close to minimum. I can measure it, but it looks old, original most likely, and I will say the best for today's job is to replace that rotor too. And last but not least, it's that caliper. When I used a lot of pressure on it, I was able to press the piston in. Do you think you can just let it go and hope that it will be fine? No, unfortunately not. I'm not one of the shops who replace these calipers all the time with every single brake job, which you can see it's a trend at those tire companies and so on. That's why the brake job costs just here rear easily $1,000 here in California. I'm not a big fan of it, but we can clearly see a problem with it. There was excessive pressure needed to be applied to push that piston inside. Now the piston has a rust on it inside, so not only I better replace that entire caliper, but I also need to perform the brake fluid flush because we have contaminated brake fluid inside of the lines. So there's very unfortunately bunch of money to be spent on this Sienna. This is my friend's vehicle. They just bought 2 Toyotas, so I can be their mechanic. And unfortunately, this is not a great news for them. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumb up and stay tuned. I have way more coming your way soon. See you later, alligator.